What you are about to hear is real, or at least, most of it is. These are stories shared on Reddit by people who experienced something they could not explain, something they could not shake, something that stayed with them long after it was over. Some of them will unsettle you. At least one of them will change how you think about the people closest to you. Let us begin. He hid in the shadows and tried to get me to leave with him. I am a single woman who lives alone, and it was after midnight when I got home. I had just stepped out of my car when I heard a man crying. He was hidden in the shadows of my neighbor's shed, just outside my security camera's view, and he asked me to give him a ride to the park because he couldn't walk. He said his leg was broken and that his girlfriend had stolen his crutches. Now, I might be a lot of things, but murder victim was not about to be one of them. I offered to call an ambulance instead. He refused and kept repeating that he just needed a ride. That was going to be a no from me. So I nodded and said, "Give me a sec, I just need to put something away," and calmly walked to my door, trying not to look frantic so he would not panic and rush me. Once inside, I locked the door and called the police. I told them he might be injured or he might be lying. I couldn't tell. It felt sketchy, and I don't do sketchy. The police arrived about 10 minutes later, and miraculously, the shadow man's broken leg had apparently been healed by divine intervention, because he was gone without a trace. My security camera has a spotlight that activates when it detects movement, and I am certain it was no accident that the shadow man stayed just outside its view the entire time. Honestly, if it were not for that camera, I might not even be here right now. Staying calm saved her. The next person had to stay calm too, while a stranger told her he had been watching her for days. He said he had been watching me for days. I was staying in a hostel at the time, and my routine was pretty fixed. Same walk to class, same route back, same timing almost every day. I never really thought much about it. One afternoon, I was walking back from class with my earphones in, not really paying attention to anything around me. As I turned onto the road near my hostel, I noticed a car parked on the side with a man sitting inside. It did not feel unusual, so I kept walking. As I passed him, he started waving to get my attention. I pulled out one earphone, thinking maybe he needed directions. Instead, he offered me a ride. I said no and kept walking, but he did not stop. He kept insisting, repeating himself, trying to get me to come closer. I told him again I did not need a ride and started walking faster. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. He said he knew where I lived, and then, almost casually, he said he had been watching me for the past 2 to 3 days. I did not respond. I just kept walking faster, trying not to panic. That's when he started getting angry. He began shouting at me to stop, like I was doing something wrong by ignoring him. Then he said something even stranger, that I was the one who had told him to wait there, that I had asked him to come meet me. I had never seen this man before in my life. He kept yelling, getting more and more frustrated that I was not stopping. I did not look back. I kept walking until I could take a shortcut that cars could not go through. The moment I turned into it, I ran. I could still hear him shouting behind me, angry that I was running away while he was talking to me. I did not stop until I reached my hostel. I have never seen him again since. But what still gets to me is how calmly he said he had been watching me, and how certain he sounded when he said I was the one who asked him to be there. It has been a while, but I still think about it. Just how easily something could have gone very wrong. He was watching. He had a story ready. The next one, she was 15, alone, and someone followed her all the way to her front door. Someone followed me home for miles after I snuck out and waited outside my house. I have a story that still sticks with me because of how easily it could have gone wrong. I still wonder who that person was. When I was 15, I snuck out of my parents' house to see my girlfriend at the time. My parents used to sleep in the living room, so I had to be extremely quiet and slip out through 2 back doors, one into the garage, then the side door outside. I even put my dad's vehicle in neutral and rolled it out of the driveway so I would not have to start the engine. I drove to my girlfriend's house and fell asleep. I woke up around 3 in the morning and panicked. My dad wakes up at 4 for work. I rushed out and started heading home. About 5 minutes away, I stopped at a 4-way intersection. There was another car there, but I did not think much of it. I turned left, and so did they. At first, it seemed like nothing. but after about 10 minutes, I realized they were still behind me. I started getting nervous and took a different route, random turns, trying to see if they would keep following. They did. I knew something was not right. I turned into my neighborhood, and they followed me in. I sped up toward my house. They stayed behind me, but slower, almost like they did not want to get too close. I pulled into my driveway, jumped out, and rushed inside through the side door, locking it immediately. Then I went to the front door and looked through the peephole. Their car was parked by our mailbox, engine still running. My parents were asleep the entire time. I did not wake them, because I knew I would get in trouble for sneaking out. So I just stayed awake, watching and listening, until I eventually fell asleep. Looking back, I have no idea why that person followed me. Maybe it was nothing, but it really did not feel like nothing. There are so many ways that night could have gone differently. For context, I am a girl, and this was 10 years ago. Engine still running, parked outside her house. The next one is creepier because the person telling the story was only a child and did not understand what was happening until years later. Creepy encounter I did not realize was creepy. When I was 13 or 14, my mother's friend asked if I would like to babysit her kids for a few hours one night. I live in a rural town, and to get to their house you have to drive to the outskirts of town, about 15 minutes up a steep and narrow hill surrounded by forest. Their house was just off the road. If you pass it, the road continues up into the mountains and forest, and eventually loops back to a main road, a substantially longer route, and pitch black the entire way through the woods. I was so excited and felt grown up to babysit. My mother's friend was lovely, and her husband was a police officer. My dad dropped me off, and the mother was going to give me a lift home. A few hours later, around 11 at night, they returned. The mother said her husband was going to drive me home. As we set off, he did not turn right, not back down the road the way we had come. He turned left, heading up the mountain and into the forest. I asked him why we were going that way. He replied, "It is just another way." Those were the only words he spoke to me the entire drive. We sat in silence. He drove slowly, deeper into the forest. When I said it was a longer route, I mean 45 minutes instead of 15. I thought it was strange, but I was a naive and innocent kid. At one point I asked if we were nearly there yet. No answer. He did drop me off home safe and sound, and I thought nothing of it, until I was an adult, and the memory suddenly came back to me one day. I do not understand why a grown man and a police officer would take that route with a young teenager at 11:30 at night. I often wonder if he had sinister intentions. I did not babysit again. Maybe some part of me knew it was wrong, even then. Some things only make sense in hindsight. The next one happened in the middle of nowhere, and the threat was not a person you could reason with. I had an acquaintance many years ago who had a scary hiking story. He was hiking in the desert in Utah. He had parked a long way down a dirt road and hiked toward a trail in an extremely remote area with his 3- and 5-year-old children. Eventually they decided it was too steep and turned around. Heading back down the trail, he could now see his truck far off in the distance and noticed a figure near it. As he got closer, he could make out that the person was examining the truck, looking in the windows, lying down to look at the undercarriage, then climbing into the truck bed and not reappearing. He was very frightened and assumed the person was planning an ambush. So when he was about half a mile away, he shouted, "Get away from my truck! Get out of here!" The man peeked out of the truck bed and stayed put. He fired a warning shot, and the man jumped out of the bed, made a sweeping motion toward each of the tires, and began walking away. They made their way to the truck carefully and found all 4 tires slashed and the fuel tank in the bed stabbed open and leaking everywhere. They were in the middle of nowhere, with no way out, and could still see the man walking off in the distance. Then the man turned around and started coming back toward them. He pulled out his cell phone and found he had signal. He called emergency services. Before the man could reach them, around 10 police officers arrived. The man saw them and began running. Police gave chase on foot and called in a plane to assist, but the man escaped completely into the remote wilderness. For 2 years, my acquaintance had no information about who it was. Eventually, the unknown tire slasher was arrested and connected to this event because he had been committing similar crimes in the area. It turned out he was living as a transient in a nearby ghost town. If you search his name, Jason Pogue, and crime, Utah. You can see he is still having run-ins with the law to this day. 2 children, no way out. The next story started as a simple exchange student trip and became something far more disturbing. Creepy and unsettling encounters during a trip to the Amazon. In April 2019, I was an exchange student in South America. I went on a trip to the Amazon with a group of other exchange students. While many strange things happened, I want to focus on 2 that were particularly unsettling. At the time, I was 18 years old, tall, thin, and white with blue eyes. I always stood out as a tourist. I was fluent in Spanish, which allowed me to talk to locals without language barriers. The first incident occurred on our first night in the Colombian and Brazilian border town of Leticia. We were all staying in a hotel that had a strange vibe from the start. The staff stared at us in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. During breakfast, I overheard other exchange students talking about a missing phone. I offered to help locate it using a tracking app, and we were able to track it to a sketchy part of town. The police accompanied us, and we found the house where the signal was coming from. The family denied involvement, but their behavior made it clear to us they were responsible. They came out with knives and machetes, yelling and staring at us. I felt a shiver down my spine, and a very strong gut feeling that we needed to leave immediately. We told the police to let the phone go. Our safety was not worth it. When we returned to the hotel, the police wanted to check the cameras outside the room that had been targeted. The unsettling discovery: 2 cameras had been mysteriously turned off for exactly 2 hours that night. I later found out why they were turned off, through someone from the hotel staff. I do not feel comfortable sharing that part, as it involved one of my friends. It was very serious and legal action was taken. Another stop was a small village in Peru's part of the Amazon. About 150 people, built on pillars above the water because the river was overflowing. After the welcome performance, the group returned to the hotel, but I decided to stay back and talk with the locals. I wanted to see an anaconda. Very touristy, I know. Someone had told me this was a good time to see them hunt. I started talking to a local man who said he could not show me a live anaconda, but offered to show me a photo on his phone. Despite everything my parents had ever taught me, I foolishly followed him to his remote, isolated home, deeper in the jungle. When we arrived, he instructed me to wait in the living room while he searched for his phone. Standing alone in the dimly lit room, I could not shake the feeling that I was in serious danger. After what felt like an eternity, he came back and said he could not find it. He asked me to come back the next day. I knew I had to leave immediately. I thanked him and got out. When I returned to the hotel and told my friends what had happened, they were horrified. I could not stop thinking about how something terrible could have happened if I had stayed. Looking back, I realized how gullible I was. Even though I consider myself rational, I did not listen to my instincts, and I put myself directly in danger. The jungle, the dimly lit room, the man who could not find his phone. The next one starts in a family's home, and by the time it is over, you will not be able to believe how it ends. Creepy encounter while babysitting. I am a 21-year-old college student and have been babysitting since I was 14. Over the years, I have learned caution and resilience. I even took a babysitting course and a self-defense course at 15. I babysit at least once a month for one particular family. I like them because they pay well, have a big house with internet I can use for homework, and the 2 kids are surprisingly well behaved. The parents have a monthly ritual of going out around 5 in the evening and returning a little after 2 in the morning. I am always offered the guest bedroom, but usually just stay awake watching their satellite television until they get back. I always take the kids out for pizza at a place with an arcade so they tire themselves out and go to sleep early. The little girl is on a mission to win a family of stuffed animals from the prize store. After this past Friday, she only needs the daddy stuffed animal to complete the collection. Anyway, I was sitting at a table watching the kids play in the ball pit while texting on my phone. A couple came and sat at the same long table, completely normal at first. But then the man asked me, "Are you the one babysitting the doctor's kids?" The parents of these children are both doctors, so I chose to answer his question with a completely unrelated statement. They seemed to see right through it. They started making weird comments about the parents, and then the woman commented on the little girl and how she wondered if she would look as pretty as her mother when she grew up. I did not know if that was meant to be creepy, but I decided to play it safe and act like it was. Then the woman looked at my shirt and said, and I quote, "Do they really let you dress like that while watching their kids?" That was my cue to gather the kids, get their prizes and go. Fast forward a few hours, both kids were bathed and in bed. I was watching television when I heard movement on the porch. I did not think much of it at first, until the front doorknob started rattling violently. I started moving toward the door, but stopped myself just in time. Remembering it was late at night, I was alone with 2 children, and I very much wanted to live. I turned around to get my taser from my bag. Then the back door started rattling too, accompanied by banging. That is when I remembered I had not re-enabled the alarm system after we returned home. I enabled it through the phone app. Almost immediately, it was disabled from outside. I re-enabled it. It was disabled again. I enabled it a 3rd time. I ran upstairs, woke the kids without telling them why, and put them in their parents' walk-in closet. I locked the bedroom door, the only door upstairs that locks, sat down with my taser, and hit the panic button on the app. Then I heard what sounded like 2 sets of footsteps coming up the stairs. I was holding it together for the kids, but deep inside, I was terrified. When I heard the footsteps near the door and watched the handle start to turn, I fired the taser into the air, just to let them know I was armed. I told them through the door that the alarm had been triggered and police were on their way. Then I heard a familiar voice. It was the father. It was the doctor. When the panic button had been activated, both parents had received a notification on the app. They had seen through the porch camera that there were 2 people, one on each side of the house. They drove straight home. When the alarm kept disarming, that was them trying to get in. I opened the door and ran into their arms and started sobbing. I had not realized how scared I truly was until that moment. A police report was filed. I gave a statement that mentioned the couple I had met at the arcade, though there was no direct evidence linking them. The camera footage did not provide a positive identification either. I am back in my own apartment now. I checked in on the kids. They are holding up fine. I am just grateful the house had proper protection and that this did not end up any worse than it did. She had a taser and she used it. The next one did not involve weapons or confrontation, just months of confusion that led to one very disturbing discovery. For months I was confused why I kept finding long hairs in my house. Then I saw my neighbor coming out of my house. I am a man in my 20s who lives alone on the very top floor of an apartment block. I have had short hair for the last 10 years of my life. The longest hair on my head is maybe an inch. But across my house I kept finding long hairs on the floor. Long brunette hairs, at least 5 to 6 inches, sometimes longer, everywhere. Bathroom floor, in the shower, in my cupboard, in my kitchen, on old clothes, living room floor, and sofas. I have been single since November and clean often enough that I was certain they were not from my ex-girlfriend. The color did not match either. She had solid black hair. These were light brunette. And finding them in the shower, where running water hits all the sides 5 or more times a week? I told myself it must have been from the gym or the bus, hairs sticking to my clothes. I waved it off. Until one day in April. I finished my early morning gym session and got a call that I did not have to go to work that day. I started walking home happy, heading up the stairs instead of taking the elevator, since I was sweaty. Just as I turned up the last flight from the 4th floor to the 5th, I saw my neighbor's daughter coming down the stairs. We locked eyes. We had never really spoken. I had spoken to her mother and father in passing, but never her. I said a confused hello, expecting her to say she needed to borrow something. She just said a quiet hey, and brushed past me. And then the smell hit me. My own shampoo, fresh out of the shower, wet. I stood outside my door for a full 2 minutes, trying to process what had just happened. Then I went to turn the key, and the door opened without me unlocking it. I always double lock, 2 separate locks with 2 different keys. I dropped my bag, took off my shoes, and ran to the shower. It was wet. I had not showered since the morning before. I went back down to the 3rd floor and knocked on her family's door. She answered with the chain on, half her face visible behind the door. I said, "Were you at my door or inside? I do not want to make this a police thing, but I know you were in there." She said, "I just had to get something. It will not happen again." Okay, bye. Door closed. That happened last month. I have since cleaned my apartment thoroughly every weekend, changed all the locks, and installed a motion sensor camera above my door that only films the stairs coming up to my floor. So far, she has not been back. Looking back, I think she had been going into my apartment since January, because that is my earliest memory of finding the hairs. She never took anything of value. Seemingly she just showered, ate some of my food, and slept in my bed. I now always take the elevator. I avoid the third floor completely. Edit, someone messaged me to check my coats and bags for tracking devices, suggesting that is how she might have known when I was coming home early. I do not have much stuff, so I think I would have found something by now, but I will do another sweep. She was living in his home, and he never knew. The next one is darker, and the punchline, when it comes, will hit you somewhere deep. I think my son is a serial killer. I tried my best. I really did. I did not want parenthood, but when it's given to you, it's hard not to fall in love with it. It has its ups and downs, sure, but through it all you learn to love your child. They are an extension of you, a part of yourself you try to mold into something better. Unfortunately, people are not that clean-cut. You tell them to go one way and they go the other. It's just how life is. Beyond the disagreements and head-bumping, it's still possible to raise a kid right. That's what I thought I was doing. My son was well-mannered, a gentleman. Once high school started, it seemed like every other week he was telling me about his new love or how he was sure this was the one. He was only 15, but who was I to cast doubt on whatever love life he found for himself? Plus, it all stayed at school, cafeteria dates and things like that. By 17, he was actually bringing girls home to have dinner with his mom and me. Now, I'm not great with names, but I do remember faces. That's why, when I started noticing the missing person flyers around town, I started paying close attention. But this was my son, the boy I had raised since I was a teenager myself. I was 16 when he was born. I worked everything I had for him. We grew up together. I couldn't convince myself that everything was fine forever, and by the time I saw Miranda's name on one of those flyers, the most recent girl he had brought home, I knew I had to talk to him. I prayed like a madman that I was wrong, but the more I thought, the more the dots started connecting. None of these girls had ever visited more than once or twice. I had already caught my son sneaking out at night on multiple occasions, and whenever he talked about them, something was off. It was like excitement, but not the normal kind. When he described them, it was like he was fantasizing, thinking about what he wanted to do to them. I came home after a long day at work, and went straight to his room. He was not there, but on his nightstand, folded neatly, were missing person flyers, each one a different ex-girlfriend. If it had just been the flyers, I might have been able to explain it away. Maybe he was helping hang them up. Maybe he had just stepped out. But that is not what stopped me. Scrawled across each flyer, in the handwriting I had helped my boy practice as a child, were complaints. Too loud, too demanding, too arrogant, too annoying. I sifted through every page. By the end, I had read 7 complaints. A tear fell down my face, streaming down my cheek. I must have been in a trance, because I did not even hear the bedroom door open. I remember only a faint, quiet, "Dad?" I turned to greet my son. Emotion overwhelmed me, and all I could think to say as I opened my arms for a hug was, "That is my boy." That ending. Let that sit for a second. The next story is different, longer, stranger, and possibly the most unsettling thing in this entire video. It starts on a hiking trail, and by the end, you will not be sure who is telling the story. My boyfriend has been acting terrified of me since we got back from the Appalachian Trail. I do not know what I did wrong. I need to write this down, because I feel like I am losing my mind, and putting it somewhere outside of my head might help. Dane and I have been together for 4 years. We are the kind of couple that finishes each other's sentences, that has a whole private language of inside jokes and shorthand. I know him better than I know anyone. I say that because I need you to understand that when I tell you something is wrong with him, I am not being paranoid. I know this man. We got back from a section hike on the Appalachian Trail 11 days ago. We did about 200 miles over 3 weeks, starting in Virginia. It was Dane's idea. He had always wanted to do a long stretch, and I had never done anything longer than a weekend trip. I was nervous. He was so excited he could barely sleep the week before we left. The first 2 weeks were incredible. Hard, but incredible. We fell into a rhythm. We would hike until late afternoon, set up camp, cook whatever dehydrated thing we had packed, and lie on top of our sleeping bags, talking until one of us fell asleep mid-sentence. I felt closer to him out there than I ever had. No phones, no obligations, just the two of us and the mountain. It was the third week when things started to feel off. I do not know how to explain it except to say that the woods changed. Not visibly, everything looked the same trail, the same trees, but the quality of the air felt different. Thicker somehow, like the atmosphere had shifted by a degree you couldn't measure but could feel in your chest. Dane felt it too. He got quieter. He had always been the one pointing things out. Look at that ridge, look at that bird, but he stopped. He just hiked. Eyes forward, jaw set. On the fourth night of that week, I woke up in the middle of the night and he was not in the tent. I found him standing about 20 feet away, at the tree line. Just standing there, looking into the dark. I called his name, and he turned around so fast, it startled me. He looked not scared exactly, more like he had been caught doing something. He said he had needed to use the bathroom. We went back to the tent. He did not sleep after that. We finished the hike 2 days later and drove home. I thought once we were back in our apartment with our things and our routines, he would return to himself. He has not. He flinches when I touch him. Not every time, but enough that I have started hesitating before I reach for him. Last week, I came up behind him while he was doing dishes and put my hand on his shoulder, and he made a sound, not a word, just a sound, and stepped away from me. He apologized immediately, said he was jumpy lately, blamed it on bad sleep. He is not sleeping. I hear him up at all hours. But when I get up to check on him, he always comes back to bed right away, says he is fine, and lies there stiff as a board until I fall asleep. He started locking the bedroom door at night. We share a bedroom. We share a bed. For the past 6 days, I have been waking up on the couch with no memory of getting there, and the bedroom door locked from the inside, and Dane on the other side of it, claiming he has no idea how I ended up in the living room. He says I must be sleepwalking. He says it gently, the way you say things to someone you are frightened of. I asked him last night to please just tell me what was wrong. I sat across from him at the kitchen table and asked him to look me in the eye and tell me what I had done. He looked at me for a long time. His jaw worked. I watched him decide something. He said, "You have not done anything. I have just been in my head since the trail. I am sorry." He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. He let go after less than a second. I went to the bathroom after dinner and stood at the sink for a long time. I looked at myself in the mirror. Normal. Tired. A little thinner than before the hike, but normal. I turned on the faucet and splashed water on my face. When I looked up, I was smiling. I had not smiled. I was not smiling. But my reflection was, just for a second, just long enough for me to see it, wearing an expression I had not put there. Wide and still and patient. Then it was just my face again. I told myself it was the lighting, the water in my eyes. But I have been thinking about the third week on the trail. How the air changed. How I have almost no clear memories from those last 2 days of hiking, just flashes. A strange taste in my mouth, a sound like something large moving parallel to the trail, just past where the trees got thick. Waking up outside the tent once with dirt under my fingernails and no explanation. I have been thinking about how Dane stood at the tree line that night, how he looked when he turned around, the sound he made when I touched his shoulder. I have been thinking about the mirror. I have been telling myself I need to ask him what he saw on that trail, what he has been seeing since we got back. But there is another part of me, quiet, patient, underneath, that does not want him to answer. That part does not want him to say it out loud. I do not know what that means. I do not know if I should be scared of what is happening to Dane, or scared of something else entirely. I just know that last night I dreamed about the woods, the smell of them, the dark, and when I woke up I was hungry in a way I have never been before. A way I do not have words for. I do not know how to end this post because I do not know what I am even asking. I guess I just needed someone else to know. I will update when I can. A reflection that smiled on its own, memories she cannot account for, and a man who locks the door every night to keep something out. Something that sleeps right beside him. The last story tonight is different. It is not a mystery. It is a confession from a man who knows exactly what he did. I think I killed my wife. She died last Thursday, when I hesitated, when I pulled back for one heartbeat when she needed me. I let her fall into the hollow. She was my wife, my love. I know that now. I teach at a university. I am 43. I am supposed to be the kind of man who can explain himself. Right now I can barely close my eyes without seeing her face. I deserve this. I know I do. I was living between two women, my wife, Jackie, and Leah. I loved them both. That is why none of it settles. That is why it keeps pressing in on me from the inside. Jackie was my wife for 11 years. She worked in research at a pharmaceutical company. Senior position, big salary. She was the kind of smart that made other smart people straighten up when she walked in. She did not work through reports or other people. She went deep into the compounds, the trials, the smallest details. She needed to see things herself. She was beautiful too, not just to me. Tall, slight, dark hair, pale skin, black eyes that lingered on you in a way that stirred something low and hard to ignore. The kind of face that made people turn without realizing it. Even when she was tired, even when she was angry, she had that kind of beauty. The problem was that living with her felt like living next to a wire that was always live. At first it was exciting, but over the years that faded. She noticed everything. If I came home 3 minutes late, if I showered before dinner on the wrong day, if my shirt smelled like coffee from somewhere I did not usually go. Over time, I began to feel like I was suffocating, like the air was slowly being pulled out of our lives. She never yelled. Sometimes I wish she had. It would have been easier to fight something loud. Instead, she would just look at me for 1 second too long, or ask one small question in that calm, even voice, and I would feel my stomach drop. There were things I said to her during our worst fights that I am not proud of. She had her way of fighting back too. Once she looked at me and said quietly, "You are the one with the crack in your heart. Behind it there is just emptiness. An endless swallowing hole no woman is ever going to fill." After a while we would patch things up, say just enough to keep going, and slip right back into the same cold distance. Her mother had killed herself after her father had an affair. She told me that before we got married. We were sitting in her car, engine off, the windows fogged. She had both hands folded in her lap, looking straight ahead. "Some people do not survive betrayal," she said. Then she looked at me and added, "And they kill families." I never forgot that, but I loved her. I need that said. I loved the smell of her hair when she came to bed late. I loved the rare way she smiled, like it had to fight through stone to get out. I loved how on good mornings she would tuck her cold feet under my leg and steal my warmth without asking. I loved her even when I was scared of her, and I was scared of her a lot toward the end. Then there was Leah. Leah was 28, a graduate student of one of my colleagues. Not my student, thank God, but close enough to my world that it made everything worse. If Jackie had ever found out I was involved with a graduate student, it would not just wreck my marriage. It could wreck my career, my name, my entire life. Leah was nothing like Jackie. If Jackie was all angles and stillness, Leah was soft where Jackie was hard. Honey-colored skin, thick blonde curls she kept tying up and letting down, wide mouth, warm blue eyes. She laughed with her whole face. When she listened, she leaned in close, and there was something in the way she smelled. Something I could not explain, but it pulled me in. She made me feel wanted. She made me feel like I could breathe. And yes, I wanted her. The first time she touched my wrist in a cafe and asked if I was okay, I felt that touch for the rest of the day. That is how it started. Then it became an affair. I always thought I was not that kind of person. Turns out I was. 3 months of deleting messages in parking lots. 3 months of checking my collar in mirrors before going home. 3 months of coming back to my own house with my pulse hammering, wondering if tonight was the night Jackie would look at me and know. She almost caught me more than once. One night my phone lit up on the table, and Jackie glanced at it before I could turn it over. She did not say anything for a full minute. Then she asked, "Do your students usually text you after midnight?" I said Leah was not my student. I do not know why I said that. Maybe because some part of me was already confessing. Jackie just looked at me. "That was not my question," she said. Eventually Leah told me she could not keep being the place I hid. She said either I leave Jackie or I stop coming to her. I told her I did not know how to do either. That same night, Jackie asked me to come with her to a cabin near a lake in the north. 2 nights, no work, just us. The owner of the cabin told us not to go far out on the ice. Looks solid till it doesn't, he said. The next morning while Jackie was in the bathroom, Leah sent me a message. If you mean it, I will wait tonight. Jackie came out and saw my face. She did not need to see the phone. Who is she? She asked. Badly. She stared at me for a long second. Then she said, very quietly, do not do this to me. She put on her coat and walked out toward the lake. I followed her. The air burned my throat. The snow squeaked under my boots. She looked so thin in that dark coat, so beautiful, so breakable. She stopped near the shore and turned to me. Who is she? She asked again. I could not answer. That was answer enough. She nodded once and turned away, and kept walking, quickly. I saw the darker patch ahead. I knew what it meant. I remember that clearly. I knew. Jackie, I called, come back. She kept going. Then the ice cracked. The sound was sharp and wrong. She dropped hard. One leg through, then both, and suddenly she was in black water up to her chest, clawing at the edge. Her face when she looked back at me. I ran. I did run, but not right away. There was 1 second, maybe less, one small filthy second when I thought, if she dies, I will not have to choose. Then I moved. I got down on the ice, reached for her, felt it break under me too, felt cold water hit my hands like knives. She grabbed my wrist once. I can still feel her nails. Then I jerked back to keep from going in myself, and that tiny backward move was enough. By the time I lunged forward again, she was gone. Afterward there were sirens, people, a blanket around my shoulders. Someone said her name. Someone said mine. I drove straight to Leah. My wife had just died and I still drove to the woman I was going to leave her for. Her door was unlocked. The room was too bare. No clothes, no books, no bag. Not messy. Emptied. And then I saw it. Her sink, a badge, familiar shape before the name even hit me. Jackie's name. Under it, 3 small glass vials in a case, and beside them, a sheet of paper. It was not addressed to anyone, but I knew it was meant for me. I do not remember the note word for word. Everything started to blur, but I remember what it meant. She had used an experimental drug from her own research to change herself, to become softer, warmer, someone I could love without reservation. Leah was Jackie. Jackie was Leah. I think I lost it a little then. You know that feeling when everything goes quiet and far away, like you have slipped just outside yourself and cannot quite get back in? I kept trying to hold those 2 women in the same person, but my mind would not let them settle. At the end of the note, she wrote that she saw it clearly. I did not love her. I loved the drug and what it turned her into, and knowing that broke her, but she could not stop. She was addicted to being the only version of herself I ever chose. I see it now. She was right. There is a hollow in me that even true love could not survive. 11 stories, some of them real, some of them something else entirely. The line between the two is thinner than you think, and that is exactly what makes them so hard to forget. If any of these stayed with you, drop a comment. We read every single one. And if you made it to the end, you already know what to do. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. New stories every week. We will see you in the next one, if you dare.